The sound of the gavel echoed through the courtroom as the judge entered. The people inside stood for a moment, then sat when the judge took his seat. The air felt heavy. Every person could feel the tension that surrounded the case. On the left side of the room sat a young mother named Lena, her face pale and tired. Her hands shook as she held a small folder of papers. Beside her sat her son Tommy, only 10 years old, his big brown eyes wide with worry. Lena worked hard every day at the city repair center, fixing old machines for little pay. Her life was not easy, but she never complained. A month ago, her workplace reported that several valuable energy cells were missing, and someone blamed her. She said she was innocent, but no one wanted to listen. Today was the final hearing. Judge Kaur looked down from his high chair. His gray eyes were sharp and his lips twisted in a small smirk. He was known for being strict, and he did not hide his dislike for poor citizens.
"Lena," he said, his voice deep and cold. "You are accused of stealing 5 energy cells from the Central Repair Center."
"Do you have anything to say before we proceed with the final decision?" Lena stood slowly. Her knees felt weak, but she tried to stay calm. "Your Honor," she said softly, "I did not take anything. I was working the night they went missing, but I did not touch those cells. Maybe there is a mistake in the record." Judge Kaur leaned back in his chair. "A mistake," he repeated, his tone mocking. "We checked the records. Your badge was scanned at the storage room that night. You are the only one who could have taken them." Lena opened her folder and held out a small paper. "My badge was borrowed that night by my coworker Mina. She asked for it because her own badge was not working." Kaur waved his hand as if brushing away her words. "Convenient excuse," he said. "And this coworker of yours has now left the city according to the files. So we cannot confirm your claim." "How very unfortunate," the courtroom whispered. Some people shook their heads in pity. Others looked bored. Tommy stared at the judge, his small fist tightening. He wanted to shout that his mother was telling the truth, but Lena placed her hand on his arm to stop him. She whispered, "Stay calm, Tommy. Let me handle this." Her lawyer, a tired man named Mr. Dorn, stood next to her and cleared his throat. "Your Honor," he said in a flat voice, "there is no solid proof that my client stole anything. The security cameras were not working that night. There is only a record of her badge being used." Judge Kaur smirked again. "You mean to tell me that we should believe a missing co-worker's story over our data logs?" "The city system does not lie, Mr. Dorn. People do." Mr. Dorn sighed. He had already lost his energy for the case. Lena saw it in his eyes. He did not believe she could win. The judge turned his attention toward Tommy. "And you, boy," he said suddenly, his voice loud. "I see you watching every move. Do you think you could argue better than your mother's lawyer?" Tommy froze. Everyone looked at him. His heart beat fast. He wanted to speak, but he knew children were not allowed to talk during trials. Judge Kaur laughed softly. "Of course you cannot," he said. "You are just a child. This is a court of law, not a playground." Lena's face burned with shame and anger. She stood straight and said, "Your Honor, please do not speak to my son that way. He is only here to support me." Kaur raised his eyebrows. "Then he should learn what happens when people lie in this court," he said coldly. "He will remember this lesson." Tommy's eyes filled with tears, but he refused to cry. He kept staring at the judge, his jaw tight. Inside him, something began to stir, a feeling of determination mixed with pain. Judge Kaur looked down at his screen. "The evidence stands. Unless the defense can present something new, I will deliver my decision." Mr. Dorn shuffled his papers weakly. "We have nothing further, Your Honor," he said in a low voice. Lena wanted to scream. She had tried everything. She had brought her work record, her messages with Mina, and her own report to the supervisor, but nothing mattered. It felt like the decision had already been made before the trial began. Kaur lifted his gavel. "Then this court finds Lena guilty of theft of city property. The punishment is 2 years of labor service under supervision." The sound of the gavel hitting the wood made Tommy jump. The room went silent. Lena closed her eyes and whispered a short prayer under her breath. 2 guards walked toward her. Tommy grabbed her arm. "No, Mama," he cried. "You did not do anything wrong." The guards gently pulled him away. Lena knelt down and hugged him tightly. "Listen to me, Tommy," she said quickly. "Go home, wait for me. Take care of yourself. Remember everything that happened here today." He nodded with tears rolling down his cheeks. "I promise, Mama." Judge Kaur watched the scene with little emotion. "Remove her," he ordered. The guards led Lena out of the courtroom. The crowd slowly began to leave. Some people whispered about the boy and his mother. A few shook their heads sadly, but no one tried to help. When the room emptied, Tommy sat alone on the bench. He looked at the judge's chair and the glowing court screen above it. He noticed something strange on the display, a small flicker of code at the bottom right corner. It lasted only a second, but his sharp eyes caught it. It was a symbol he had seen before, a mark from an old software his father once worked on before he passed away. Tommy stared at it, confused. What was that doing on a courtroom system? His father had told him long ago that his program, a machine learning tool for judging cases, was never finished. It was supposed to help humans make fair decisions by removing personal bias, but the project was sold to the government years ago, and his father never worked on it again. As he left the courtroom, the city lights outside blinked in the gray afternoon sky. The buildings rose high and cold, made of steel and glass. The streets were full of people and machines moving in perfect order. But inside Tommy's heart, nothing felt orderly anymore. His world had been broken. At home, he sat at his small desk and turned on his father's old data tablet. The screen flickered to life, showing rows of notes, blueprints, and code from years ago. His father's name appeared in the corner, and Tommy felt a lump in his throat. He whispered to himself, "You said your program was meant to find truth, Papa. Maybe it can still help." Tommy started typing. His fingers moved slowly at first, then faster as he searched through the old files. He remembered the lessons his father taught him about logic and justice. His father used to say, "Truth is not about who speaks louder. It is about what the data says if you know how to read it." As the night went on, Tommy studied court laws and old digital records. He found public archives filled with past cases. The pattern was strange. Judge Corr's name appeared again and again. Every case involving poor citizens or small workers ended in the same way, guilty verdicts. But cases for rich or connected people were often dismissed or delayed. Tommy leaned back in his chair and whispered, "This is not fair. This is not justice." He knew no one would listen to a 10-year-old. The city system trusted data and rank, not words from a child. But he also knew something the adults did not: how to look into the hidden layers of a program. He had done it many times while learning from his father's tablet. As he read more of his father's code, he began to see the same flicker symbol he saw in court. It was part of a subroutine designed to filter case data. That meant the system could decide what information the judge saw and what was hidden. If someone changed that filter, they could easily make a person look guilty even when they were not. Tommy sat still, thinking. "If I can find how that filter works, maybe I can prove Mama's innocence," he said quietly. The clock showed midnight, but he did not stop. He felt a fire inside him. Every insult from Judge Corr, every tear from his mother's face, every whisper from the courtroom, all of it pushed him forward. He took a small notebook and wrote down everything he remembered from the trial. He drew the courtroom, the judge's screen, the strange code flicker, and the time it happened. He wrote about the missing co-worker, Mina, about the security logs, about how the cameras were not working. He filled page after page until his eyes grew heavy. Before sleeping, he looked at his mother's photo on the table. She was smiling in it, holding him as a baby. "I will bring you back, Mama," he said softly. "I will make them listen." That night, for the first time, Tommy dreamed of standing in the same courtroom, but this time he was not silent. He stood tall beside his mother, holding proof in his hands. The crowd was listening, and the judge looked afraid. When he woke up, the sun was shining through the window. His notebook lay open on the table, filled with plans. He knew what he had to do next. He whispered to himself, "If no one else will fight for her, I will." And with that, the boy who had been mocked in court began his quiet journey toward justice. The courtroom had broken his heart, but it had also awakened his mind. That was the moment when Tommy stopped being just a frightened child. That was the moment he started becoming something far greater, a seeker of truth. Morning came quietly in the small home where Tommy lived. The air felt cold, and the light that entered through the window made lines across the floor. Tommy sat at the same table where he had fallen asleep the night before. His eyes were tired, but his mind was full of plans. His mother was now in the city labor center, working under strict watch. The house felt empty without her voice. But Tommy had no time for sadness. He had promised his mother he would fix everything. He turned on the old data tablet again. The screen showed rows of green letters and numbers. It was the same code his father had written years ago. Tommy scrolled through it slowly, trying to understand every line. His father had been a software engineer, but after his death, most of his work had been forgotten. Now Tommy wanted to bring it back to life. Tommy spoke softly to himself as he worked. This part reads court data. This one checks judge records. But this here, he said, pointing to the screen. This is something strange. He saw a small program that changed the way case files were shown to the judge. It used a pattern called a bias filter. The filter took small details like a person's address, job, or income and used them to mark a person as more or less trustworthy. That mark was hidden, but it changed how the system displayed the evidence. Tommy's eyes widened as he understood what that meant. The system decides who looks guilty, he whispered. Not the judge. The machine does it first. He took notes in his small notebook again. Every word he wrote made him feel stronger. He was not only fighting for his mother now, he was fighting against something much bigger. Days passed and Tommy stopped going to school. His teacher sent messages asking why he was absent, but he ignored them. Every day he spent hours reading about court rules and computer networks. He read about data security, government software, and machine learning. Most of the words were too hard for his age, but he had a sharp mind and learned fast. One afternoon, while going through an online law library, he found a section about public access to court archives. The city allowed citizens to see past trial results through the data network, but the system was protected by strong passwords. Tommy smiled faintly. His father had taught him something long ago. Every code has a door, he used to say. You just need to find the right key. Tommy searched through his father's old files and found a sequence of numbers hidden in one corner. When he entered them into the archive login, the system opened. For the first time, he saw hundreds of old trials. Each file had names, charges, and verdicts. He started reading them one by one. The pattern he saw made his heart sink. Every poor worker or single parent who appeared before Judge Kaur was marked as high risk in the system. Those cases always ended with a guilty verdict. But the people with better jobs or higher ranks were marked low risk and they were often freed. Tommy whispered, "So this is how they do it." He saved the files on his tablet. If he could prove that the same pattern was used in his mother's case, he could show the world that the court was unfair. But to do that, he needed help. He remembered a friend of his father who used to visit when he was younger. His name was Mr. Jalen, an old systems engineer who lived near the lower district. Tommy put on his small backpack and walked through the busy city streets. Machines floated above, delivering goods. People moved fast, lost in their own worries. When Tommy reached Jalen's small workshop, he knocked on the door. The old man opened it and looked surprised. "Tommy," he said kindly, "what brings you here, my boy?" Tommy stepped inside and showed him the tablet. "I need help, Mr. Jalen. I think something is wrong with the court system. My mother was punished for something she did not do." Jalen frowned and sat at his desk. "What do you mean?" Tommy showed him the files and the strange filter code. Jalen read the data carefully and his eyes widened. "This is serious," he said. "This filter can change the way the judge sees evidence. It can make a person look guilty before the trial even starts." Tommy nodded. "Judge Kaur used this system in my mother's case. I saw the same symbol on his screen. I think someone changed my father's program to make it unfair." Jalen leaned back in his chair. "Your father wanted that system to help people, not to hurt them. If this is true, then someone corrupted his work." Tommy's voice trembled slightly. "Can we fix it?" Jalen thought for a moment. "Fixing it is dangerous. The system belongs to the city. But we can make a copy. If we prove that this filter exists, the court will have to listen." Together they worked for hours. Jalen helped Tommy build a new program that could read the court's digital files without changing them. Tommy named it Lexa, short for Legal Examiner Assistant. The program could scan thousands of cases at once and find patterns of bias. By evening, Lexa was ready. Tommy connected it to the city archive and waited. The screen flashed again and again as lines of data passed through. After some time, Lexa spoke in a calm digital voice. "Pattern detected. Judge Kaur's rulings show consistent bias based on income classification." Tommy felt a mix of fear and excitement. "It worked," he said. "We have proof." Jalen smiled proudly. "You are just like your father," he said. "But listen carefully. You must be careful with this information. If the wrong people find out, they might try to silence you. Tommy nodded. I understand. He thanked Jalen and went home as the sun began to set. The city lights flickered on and the streets glowed softly. Tommy walked slowly, thinking of what he had seen. His heart felt heavy, but he also felt powerful for the first time. He was no longer just a helpless child. At home, he turned on Lexa again. The program greeted him with a short message. Good evening, Tommy. Shall we continue analysis? He smiled a little. Yes, Lexa. I want to see my mother's case file. The AI began to scan the trial records. It listed every statement made during the hearing, every piece of evidence shown, and every word from Judge Kaur. Tommy watched the text scroll across the screen. Then Lexa stopped. Unusual entry detected, it said. Tommy leaned closer. Show me. A hidden tag appeared at the bottom of the record. It read Flag High Risk Automatic Judgment Priority. That tag was not visible to the public. It meant that his mother's case had been marked as untrustworthy before the trial even began. The system had already chosen her fate. Tommy clenched his fists. They cheated, he said softly. They cheated before she even spoke. He saved the file and backed it up on multiple drives. He knew this was his strongest proof. But he also knew he needed people to believe him. If he went to the court now, they would laugh at him again. He had to find a way to make the world listen. The next morning, Tommy used the city's public data forum. It was a place where citizens could post research or discoveries for everyone to see. He created a new account using a hidden name and uploaded a report titled Hidden Bias in the City Justice System. In it, he explained how the system used a secret risk tag that made certain people lose unfairly. He attached data from hundreds of cases, including his mother's. When he finished uploading, he sat back and watched the screen. For a few minutes, nothing happened. Then a small message appeared. Someone had commented, "Is this real?" Then another message appeared. "This looks serious. We should investigate." Within an hour, hundreds of people were talking about the report. By evening, the city's news channels were discussing it. Reporters were asking how a child had found such information. No one knew who posted it, but the evidence was too strong to ignore. The city council ordered an emergency check of the court system. Tommy watched all this from home. He felt nervous but proud. He looked at the photo of his mother again. They will see the truth now, he whispered. Later that night, his screen flashed with a new message. It was from an unknown sender. The message read, "You found something you were not supposed to. Stop digging before you get hurt." Tommy's heart skipped a beat. Someone had discovered what he did. He closed the tablet quickly and turned off the lights. The room fell silent, but inside his mind, he knew there was no turning back. The next morning, the city news announced that Judge Kaur's courtroom would be under review. Reporters were demanding answers about the bias filter. Tommy smiled faintly. The truth had begun to move, and nothing could stop it now. He sat down again and opened the tablet. "Lexa," he said, "we did it. But there is more work to do. They will try to hide everything. We have to be ready," the AI voice replied. "Understood." Preparing deeper scan of system archives, Tommy leaned back and looked out the window. The sun rose over the tall city towers, casting golden light over the streets. He felt hope rise inside him. He knew this was only the beginning. The real battle was still ahead. But for the first time since his mother's arrest, he believed victory was possible. The boy who had once been mocked in court was no longer silent. He was learning how to fight the system that had broken his family, and deep inside him, the same spark of genius that had lived in his father now burned brighter than ever. The morning after the news spread across the city, people were still talking about the strange discovery in the court system. On the public screens in every street and shop, news hosts were discussing the bias filter. They said it was the biggest scandal the city had seen in years, yet no one knew who had found it. The person who exposed the truth had used no name, no address, only a report full of proof and logic. Inside a small room in the lower district, that nameless investigator sat quietly. It was Tommy. He was eating a simple breakfast while watching the news. His hands trembled a little as he held the cup of milk. Every channel talked about his report. One reporter said the city council had begun checking every case made by Judge Kaur. Another said the Justice Department had called for an emergency review. Tommy felt both proud and scared. He had done something no child was ever expected to do, but he also knew that what he started was dangerous. Someone had already sent him a warning message. He kept thinking about it. Who had written it? Was it from Judge Kaur or from someone else working in the system? He turned toward the tablet that still lay open on the table. The AI voice of Lexa spoke softly. "Good morning, Tommy. System scan is complete. Would you like to see the results?" Tommy nodded. "Show me, Lexa." The screen filled with lines of data and images. Lexa had searched every file connected to Judge Kaur's network. It found that the bias filter was not his invention. It was part of a government software update created by a private company that built digital tools for the courts. That company's system used income, family records, and even neighborhood information to decide how much trust a person deserved. The program called it Justice Score. Tommy's eyes narrowed as he read the words. "Justice Score," he repeated. "They use numbers to decide who deserves to win." "That is not justice," Lexa continued. "This feature was approved 3 years ago. It was meant to save time by predicting outcomes. However, it shows strong bias towards citizens with higher social ranking." Tommy took out his notebook and wrote every detail. He drew a chart showing how poor citizens were punished faster, while wealthy citizens received lighter sentences. He circled the company name Data Core Systems. He had never heard of it before. He thought for a moment, then said, "Lexa, can you find who owns Data Core Systems?" The AI replied, "Searching." After a few seconds, the result appeared. Main owner, Varick Industries. Main investor, City Council member Arden Kaur. Tommy froze. He whispered the name again. Kaur. It was the same name as the judge who mocked him. Now it made sense. The judge was not only using the bias system, he helped build it. He had turned his father's old program into a tool of injustice for his own gain. Tommy's heart pounded fast. "So that is why he did not listen to Mama," he said. He was protecting his own system. He leaned back in his chair and stared at the ceiling. He felt anger building inside him, but he also felt something stronger, a sense of duty. His mother was not the only one who had suffered. Many others had lost their freedom because of this corrupt system. He could not stop now. He had to expose the truth completely. He opened a new file on his tablet and began writing a second report. This time it was longer and more detailed. He explained how Judge Kaur and his company had used the Justice Score system to control verdicts. He included proof from Lexa's data and screenshots of the code. He even added a clear explanation that anyone could understand, so that ordinary citizens could see how unfair it was. When he finished, he sent the report to the city's largest news network under another hidden name. He added a message that read, "Share this with the people. Justice belongs to everyone." A few hours later, the news broke again. Reporters announced that a secret company connected to a high-ranking city judge had built the bias system. People were angry. Protests started forming near the courthouse. Citizens carried signs that said, "We want fair trials and justice is not a number." Judge Kaur stayed silent, but the pressure was growing. The city council was forced to hold a public meeting to address the problem. That night, Tommy sat near his window, watching the bright lights of the city. His tablet suddenly blinked with a new message. The sender's name was hidden, but the message said, "You are very brave. I am a journalist trying to uncover the same truth. I want to meet you." Tommy hesitated. He did not know if it was a trap. But if the message was real, it could help him reach more people. After thinking for a while, he decided to reply. "I will meet you tomorrow morning near the old library," he wrote. The next day, Tommy wore his plain jacket and took the small tablet with him. The streets were full of people talking about the protests. When he reached the library, a tall woman was standing near the gate, holding a small recording device. She smiled when she saw him. "You must be the one who found the bias system," she said softly. "My name is Mira. I am a reporter from City News." Tommy looked at her carefully. "How did you find me?" "I followed the data trail," Mira said. "Your report was too perfect. Only someone with access to the old legal code could write it. I guessed you had a family connection to it." Tommy hesitated but decided to trust her. "My father made the first version of the system," he said. "It was meant to be fair. But Judge Kaur changed it." Mira nodded. "I believe you. We have been investigating Kaur for months. We just needed solid proof. If you give me your files, I can make sure the whole city sees them." Tommy opened his tablet and showed her the data. Everything is here, he said. But be careful. Someone sent me a warning to stop. Mira smiled kindly. Do not worry. The truth will protect us. That afternoon, the news broadcast a live report. Mira stood outside the courthouse holding Tommy's data in her hand. She explained how the justice score system worked and how it had been used unfairly. She also revealed that a mysterious young investigator had found the proof. Inside the courthouse, Judge Kaur watched the report on his private screen. His face turned pale. He called his assistant and shouted, "Find out who sent that information. Find the source now," but it was too late. The city council announced that an independent review team would check every verdict from the past 5 years. They also suspended Judge Kaur until the investigation ended. When Tommy saw the news, he felt relief, but he knew it was not finished yet. The system still existed. If they only punished the judge but kept the program, others could use it again. He had to destroy the bias filter completely. That night, he and Lexa worked for hours. He told the AI, "We have to build a tool that can clean the system. It should erase the justice score from every file." Lexa replied, "That will require deep access to the government mainframe." Tommy nodded. "Can you do it?" After a short pause, the AI said, "With your help, yes." They began to work together. Tommy wrote new lines of code while Lexa calculated safe ways to enter the system. Every time the firewall blocked them, Tommy found another path. His father's old lessons guided him. He remembered the words, "If you fight for truth, never fear complexity." Hours passed until finally the screen displayed a message. "System access granted." Bias filter located. Tommy smiled. "Delete it, Lexa." The AI's voice became firm. "Deleting bias filter from central database." The progress bar on the screen slowly filled up. When it reached 100%, the system sent a message. "Bias filter removed successfully." Tommy leaned back and closed his eyes. For the first time, he felt free. His mother's name would now be cleared because the false data that marked her as guilty no longer existed. Every future case would be fair. The next morning, city officials confirmed that the bias filter had vanished from their systems. They called it a mysterious internal correction. The public celebrated. People cheered outside the courthouse. Some said the city had been given a new chance for fairness. Mira tried to contact Tommy again, but his account was gone. He had deleted all his posts and erased his trail. He did not want fame. He only wanted his mother back home. Days later, the court announced that all past verdicts made under the bias filter would be reviewed. Lena's name was on the list. When Tommy heard that, his eyes filled with tears. He knew it was working. That evening, he walked to the top of a small hill where he could see the whole city glowing under the night sky. He whispered to himself, "I did it, Mama. Soon you will come home." He looked at the tablet beside him. The AI Lexa said softly, "Mission complete, Tommy, but remember, truth must always be protected." He smiled. "I will remember." Far away in the council building, officials argued about how the filter had been deleted. Some believed it was the work of a skilled hacker. Others said it was an inside whistleblower. No one suspected that the one who had changed the city's justice forever was a 10-year-old boy sitting quietly in the lower district. The people called the unknown hero the child advocate, a name that spread across the network. No one knew his face or his story, but everyone knew his message. Justice was not a machine's decision. Justice was the courage to speak truth, even when no one listened. And as Tommy closed his eyes that night, he knew his journey was not over yet. He had uncovered the truth, but now he had to make sure the world learned from it. The fight for fairness had only just begun. The morning sun rose over the city, spilling gold and silver light across the tall glass towers. The streets were unusually crowded, filled with people speaking in low tones and carrying small signs demanding justice. Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed and reporters moved quickly, their microphones catching every word. Today was different. Today, the court would reopen Lena's case. Inside the courthouse, the atmosphere was tense. Citizens filled the benches, whispering to one another. Some were neighbors of Lena, some were workers who had lost to the unfair system before, and some were simply curious about the mysterious events that had shaken the city. At the center of it all stood Lena, calm but nervous, her hands folded in front of her. She was wearing a simple dress, but her eyes shone with quiet determination. Beside her stood a new lawyer, Mr. Salim, appointed by the court after the public outcry. He had reviewed Tommy's data and believed in the evidence fully. Tommy watched from a small seat at the back of the courtroom. He wore a plain jacket, trying to remain unseen, but his eyes were sharp. He had prepared everything. Lexa, the AI program, ran quietly on his small tablet, ready to display the proof if needed. Judge Kaur entered the courtroom slowly. His usual smirk was gone. Instead, his face was pale and his eyes darted nervously across the crowded room. Today, he was not in control. Today, the people were watching. The clerk called the court to order. "This court will hear the reopened case of Lena," the clerk announced. "All previous decisions are suspended until the completion of today's trial." Lena stood and gave a small nod to her lawyer. Mr. Salim began by presenting the evidence collected by Tommy. "Your Honor, this is not just a personal case," he said. "This is a matter of justice for every citizen affected by the biased system." The digital court records show that Lena's case was marked with a high-risk score before the trial even began. She was not judged fairly. He connected Tommy's tablet to the main court screen. Lexa's interface appeared, glowing softly. Charts, numbers, and highlighted code filled the screen. The courtroom fell silent. Every person, including Judge Kaur, stared at the proof. "Lexa has analyzed hundreds of cases," Mr. Salim continued. "The data shows a clear pattern of bias. Citizens of lower income and lower social rank are more likely to be found guilty. Lena's case is a direct example of this system at work." Judge Kaur opened his mouth to speak, but the clerk stopped him. "You may respond after all evidence is presented," the clerk said firmly. The room murmured. The evidence was clear and undeniable. The journalists in the back whispered excitedly, taking notes and recording the display. Some citizens gasped as they saw how many people had suffered under the same system. Tommy watched silently. He felt a small wave of pride. Lexa's data had done its job perfectly. The truth was on the screen for everyone to see. Mr. Salim continued, "We also have proof of system manipulation. Judge Kaur himself is connected to the company that owns the bias program. This conflict of interest shows that Lena and others were judged unfairly to protect personal gain." Judge Kaur's hands shook slightly as he tried to maintain composure. He cleared his throat. "This is absurd," he said. "The system is official. These claims are baseless." A lawyer from the Court Ethics Council stood. "Your Honor, the evidence has been reviewed by independent experts. The bias program exists and has influenced multiple verdicts unfairly. This court has no choice but to consider this in the current trial." Judge Kaur looked around the room. The citizens were watching. The cameras were on him. The screen above him displayed every proof line clearly. For the first time, he felt powerless. Lena's heart pounded as she listened to the discussion. She thought of her son and the long nights he had spent analyzing the data. She thought of how he had silently carried the weight of injustice on his small shoulders. The courage of her child filled her with quiet hope. Mr. Salim motioned toward the screen. "We ask that the court take this evidence seriously and deliver a verdict based on truth, not manipulation. Lena is innocent of the charges against her. The records show she was at work the entire night the theft occurred, and the supposed evidence was influenced by a corrupt system." The clerk nodded. "Let the court review the evidence." For several minutes, the room was silent except for the soft hum of technology. Lexa continued to analyze every statement, every log, and every timestamp. The AI even highlighted the moment the bias filter had flagged Lena's case as high risk. Citizens leaned forward, understanding for the first time the depth of corruption in their city's court system. Judge Kaur tried to speak again. "This is impossible," he said. "Machines cannot make legal decisions." Mr. Salim looked directly at him. "Machines did not make the final decision. They revealed the unfair manipulation that was hidden. Justice is not a machine. Justice is human integrity. Your Honor, the truth is before you. It is your choice to honor it." The room was silent. Judge Kaur's face flushed. His eyes darted toward the council members who watched closely. He realized he could no longer hide behind his power. The AI and the data had exposed him fully. After a long pause, the clerk spoke. "All evidence has been presented. The court will now deliberate." The citizens waited in tense silence. Outside the courthouse, a small crowd had gathered. They could hear the murmur from inside. They carried signs calling for justice, unaware of the full truth but trusting that fairness would win. Tommy leaned back in his chair, watching. He thought of the long hours he had spent reading code, analyzing data and learning about the law. He felt proud but also nervous. This was the moment that mattered most. Inside the judge's chambers, the council met with Core. "We cannot ignore this evidence," one member said firmly. "The data proves bias. The judge himself is involved in the system that corrupted verdicts." Core's voice was low, almost a whisper. I followed the rules." "Rules do not justify corruption," another council member replied. "You had the power to act justly. Instead, you protected a biased program. The law requires a fair trial for every citizen." Core looked down. For the first time, he felt shame. He realized he had lost not only the court's respect but the trust of the people. Back in the courtroom, the deliberation took hours. Citizens whispered among themselves, reporters typed notes rapidly, and Tommy held his breath. Finally, the clerk returned and announced, "The court has reached a verdict." Lena stood, her heart beating fast. Tommy gripped his notebook tightly. "The court finds Lena innocent of all charges," the clerk declared. "All records related to this case will be corrected. Furthermore, the Justice Score program will be removed from all court systems and replaced with transparent procedures." A wave of relief swept through the courtroom. Citizens clapped and cheered softly. Reporters raised their cameras, capturing the moment for the world to see. Lena's eyes filled with tears, and she turned toward the back of the courtroom. Tommy stood slowly and walked toward her. She knelt down and hugged him tightly. "You did this, my son," she whispered. "You brought justice." Tommy smiled faintly. "We did it together, Mama." Outside the courthouse, the crowd erupted in cheers. The city had witnessed the courage of a small boy who had dared to fight against a system that seemed unbeatable. People began to believe again that fairness could exist. Later that day, officials met to discuss the removal of the bias system. Every record would be checked. Judges and clerks would undergo training on fairness and ethics. Citizens were invited to review future cases. The city was slowly restoring trust in its courts. Tommy went home with his mother. Lena held his hand tightly as if afraid to let go. "You were brave beyond your years," she said. "You reminded everyone what justice really means." Tommy looked at the tablet lying quietly on the table. Lexa's program had finished its work. The AI had not only found the truth but had also guided him step by step. He whispered softly, "Thank you, Lexa. You helped me make a difference." As night fell over the city, lights sparkled on the streets, and a cool wind blew gently through the open windows. Tommy sat quietly, thinking about the journey so far. He had learned about courage, justice, and the power of knowledge. He had learned that even a small person could make a big change. For Lena, the world felt brighter. Her name was cleared, her reputation restored, but more importantly, her son had grown in ways she could never have imagined. He had become a true advocate, a seeker of truth, and a reminder that intelligence, courage, and honesty could overcome even the deepest injustice. Tommy knew the fight for fairness was not over. There would always be systems that needed correction, people who needed guidance, and truths that had to be revealed. But he also knew something else. He had the tools, the mind, and the courage to continue. As he looked at the city skyline, he whispered softly, "This is only the beginning." And for the first time, the boy who had once been mocked in a courtroom felt the quiet power of victory. The city woke to a new day, brighter than it had been in years. The streets were cleaner, calmer, and filled with people who walked with a sense of hope. News reports still played endlessly on public screens, showing the removal of the justice score system and the review of past cases. Citizens were talking about fairness, courage, and the power of truth. But in a small apartment in the lower district, a mother and her son sat quietly sharing a simple breakfast. Lena looked at her son Tommy with pride and amazement. Her eyes glimmered with tears, but her smile was warm and steady. "You changed everything, Tommy," she said softly. "I don't know how to thank you enough," Tommy shrugged. "I just wanted people to see the truth, Mama. I wanted you to come home safely. That's all." Lena reached across the table and held his small hands tightly. "It is more than that. You reminded everyone that even the smallest voice can make the greatest change." Tommy blushed. He had spent countless nights studying law, reading through code and analyzing the biased system, but he had never imagined that the world would notice. He remembered the courtroom, the judge's smirk, and how powerless he had felt at first. Now the world had seen what he had discovered and justice had been restored. After breakfast, they turned on the city news. Reporters were covering the official statements from the council. The head of the council, Councillor Vance, stood at the podium speaking in a steady, serious voice. Today, he said, we acknowledge a mistake that affected hundreds of citizens. The Justice Score program was unfair, biased, and unfit to decide human outcomes. It has been removed permanently. Every past verdict will be reviewed, starting with cases most affected by bias. Justice will be restored for all. The crowd outside cheered as the broadcast continued. People were smiling, embracing strangers, and holding their children close. The city had learned a lesson about fairness, transparency, and courage. Lena hugged Tommy tightly. This is because of you, she said. Your intelligence, your courage, your patience. You did what no one else could do. Tommy shook his head. No, Mama, you were the one who needed me. You taught me what is right and what is wrong. I just followed what I learned from you and Papa. Lena's eyes softened. She remembered her late husband, Tommy's father, who had once dreamed of a fair system where truth was more important than wealth or power. He would be proud, she whispered. Tommy smiled faintly. I hope so. The news continued. They spoke about Judge Kaur, who had been suspended and would now face a full investigation. Officials explained that no person should ever have the power to manipulate justice for personal gain. Citizens nodded, relieved that fairness had finally returned to their courts. That evening, Tommy sat at his small desk opening the tablet one more time. Lex's program still ran quietly. The AI had been instrumental in uncovering bias and guiding him through complex legal and technical problems. Tommy smiled as he watched Lexa's interface glow softly. Lexa, he said, we did it. We fixed the system and Mama is free. But what now? There are still many things in this city that need justice, Lexa replied calmly. The fight for truth is ongoing, Tommy. You have proven that even a young mind can influence great change. Continue to learn, observe, and speak. Justice requires courage. Tommy nodded. He had spent months hidden in the glow of his small screen. But now he understood the full meaning of responsibility. Knowledge alone was not enough. It had to be used wisely. Courage, patience, and fairness were just as important as intelligence. The next morning, Lena and Tommy went to the courthouse to check on the status of her records. Citizens were gathered outside, some smiling, some shaking hands. Lawyers and reporters moved quickly, discussing cases, sharing updates, and celebrating the restoration of justice. Inside the courthouse, new judges and clerks were taking their places. Transparent procedures were being implemented. Records were being corrected. Lena's name was officially cleared, and a small ceremony marked the return of her reputation. She felt weight lifted from her shoulders. Tommy watched quietly from the corner. He felt proud, but he also felt something more important, a sense of responsibility. The world was bigger than his own family. There were other injustices, other citizens waiting for fairness, and now he had a chance to help, not as a child afraid of the world, but as someone who understood the importance of truth. As the day went on, citizens approached Lena and Tommy. Some wanted to thank them for courage. Some wanted to know the secret of how they uncovered the truth. Tommy smiled politely, giving small explanations without revealing everything. He had learned the importance of discretion. Not all battles could be fought openly. Some required patience, strategy, and careful planning. By evening, they returned home. Lena prepared a small dinner while Tommy set the tablet aside. For the first time in months, the apartment felt quiet, safe, and peaceful. Lena looked at her son and said softly, Tommy, you are wise beyond your years. You reminded everyone that truth and courage matter more than power and wealth. Tommy nodded. I only wanted to protect you. But I think I learned something too. Justice is not just about winning a case. It is about standing for what is right, even when it is hard, and even when no one is listening. Lena smiled and placed a hand on his shoulder. Exactly, my son. And you showed everyone that even a child can make a difference. That night, Tommy went to his small room and looked out the window. The city lights glittered like stars below him. The streets were alive with people talking, smiling, and hoping again. He felt a quiet satisfaction. The fight had been hard and the path had been dangerous, but the result was worth it. He whispered to himself, This is only the beginning. I will make sure that fairness never disappears again. Days passed, and the story of Lena and her son spread across the city and beyond. Citizens began calling the mysterious young investigator the child advocate. People admired not just his intelligence, but his courage, his patience, and his dedication to fairness. He had reminded humanity of something that had been forgotten, that justice belongs to everyone, not only the powerful. The city began to change. Judges and clerks underwent training in ethics and transparency. Citizens were given access to records and allowed to observe the judicial process. Laws were adjusted to prevent bias, and every new case was now closely monitored for fairness. The legacy of one young boy's determination would affect generations. Lena returned to her old job at the repair center. Her co-workers welcomed her warmly. She shared little of the dangers they had faced, but she told them about the importance of courage and truth. Tommy returned to school, quietly continuing his studies. But now he knew that knowledge combined with integrity could move mountains. One evening, Lena and Tommy sat together on the small balcony of their apartment. The city lights stretched endlessly before them. Lena took Tommy's hand and said softly, "You have changed the world, my son. Not because you are clever, but because you care. Never forget that truth and kindness are stronger than any machine or system." Tommy smiled and whispered, "I will remember, Mama. I will continue to fight for what is right, for everyone who needs help." For the first time, they both felt completely safe, completely proud, and completely hopeful. The world was imperfect, but it could be made better with courage, intelligence, and honesty. Tommy had learned that even a child could stand against injustice, and his story would remind humanity that fairness and truth are worth fighting for. The city slept peacefully that night, unaware of the small boy who had changed its future. But those who knew the truth, Lena, Tommy, and a growing number of citizens, understood that one voice, one mind, and one heart could indeed bring justice to the world, and so the verdict of humanity was clear. Courage, truth, and integrity are the greatest powers of all. Tommy had proven it. Lena's name was restored, the system was corrected, and hope was alive again. The story of a small boy who refused to be silent became a symbol of change, inspiration, and the enduring strength of human spirit. The child advocate had begun a legacy, and for years to come, people would remember that even in a world of machines and algorithms, the heart and mind of a determined human being could restore justice and light the path for all. Tommy looked once more at the city skyline, holding his mother's hand. He felt a quiet promise deep in his heart. The world would be fair, and he would continue to protect it, wherever and whenever he could. The journey had ended, but the mission of truth and justice would go on forever.